Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, April 22nd, 2022, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we're going to take a look back at the series that was for the Orioles in Oakland as they lost 3 out of 4 on the road against the Athletics this week. First, we'll take a look at the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' Thursday loss as they fell 6-4 to Oakland. Then the 5 things you need to know from the losses on Monday and Tuesday, which we weren't able to talk about on the podcast so far this week. And then at the end of the pod, we will get you ready for the weekend series in Anaheim between the Orioles and the Angels. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So we're talking all things Orioles on the West Coast on this episode. The 4 games in Oakland and the 3 games coming up in Anaheim. But before we get to that, just did want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first listen of the day. Locked On Orioles is free and available on all podcast listening platforms. That's Apple Podcasts, that's Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and a review on those apps, especially Apple Podcasts, that would really, really help out the pod. Did want to thank you that we got over 100 ratings on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for getting us there. Next up, 200. Remember, we're also on YouTube as well, approaching 300 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. Make sure to hit that red subscribe button right down there. Like the videos, comment on the videos. Let me know your thoughts, and you can be part of the conversation right here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. But also wanted to thank you. Last week here on the podcast, the biggest listener week ever in Locked On Orioles history is on Monday. I'm coming up on my 500th episode hosting this podcast, and really couldn't have done it without you guys, the listeners. So thank you so much for tuning in here to the pod and making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. And for your first listen today, we're talking O's and A's. And we start with the Thursday matinee game in Oakland that finished this series as the Orioles lose it 6-4 to the Oakland Athletics and drop 3 of 4 in this 4-game set out on the West Coast. Now, the Orioles were in every game. It was 4 close games, but they just didn't do enough offensively. I mean, yeah, they scored 4 runs in Thursday's game, but they scored 1 run in each of the first 3 games. It was enough to win 1-0 on Wednesday, but it was not enough in the rest of the game. So I'm going to start with the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 6-4 loss to the Athletics on Thursday afternoon. And the first thing you need to know is that, frankly, the bullpen, really for the first time this year as a unit, just did not hold up for the Orioles in Oakland on Thursday. It's been arguably the best bullpen in baseball all year. And, the team ERA has been great. The Orioles leading the league in Fangraphs pitcher war heading into play on Thursday. They had given up the least earned runs in the American League heading into play on Thursday, but it was not their day in the Thursday game. They allowed 6 runs on 11 hits to this Oakland lineup. And we'll get to the starter, Tyler Wells, in a second, but it started off really good for the bullpen. Joey Krehbiel came in and relieved Tyler Wells in the 3rd inning, got 2 big outs, then went 1-2-3 in the 4th. He retired all 5 batters he faced, 2 strikeouts through just 21 pitches. Joey Krehbiel still has a 0 ERA on the season. Another good reliever find from the Rays for the Orioles. But you had one guy suffer his first blemish of the year, and that was Keegan Aiken, as he comes into this game in the 5th inning and gives up a 2-run homer to Sean Murphy that made it a 4-1 Oakland lead at that point. Just left a changeup down the middle, basically. Murphy obliterated it for a 2-run shot. Aiken did come back out and work a scoreless 6th, but he gave up 2 runs on 2 hits over 2 innings, 2 Ks, no walks, and that home run. And, he had looked so good early. Those were his first runs that Aiken had given up this year. And, it was just unfortunate that he threw that bad changeup. But, the fastball was still in the zone. He was pounding the strike zone with that fastball, throwing a lot of strikes once again. That's been the thing all year. He's throwing an incredible amount of strikes. But here was the issue. He only throws 2 changeups and one of them gets obliterated. Both of them were put in play, and one of them's down the middle and gets obliterated. He threw 25 pitches. Now, here's the difference from his previous outings where he was getting a lot of swings and misses and a lot of called strikes. He got 10 called strikes. He got 4 foul balls. There were 6 balls put in play. So that's a lot of strikes there. But he only got 1 swing and miss in the 25 pitches he threw. The stuff was not as sharp for Keegan Aiken, and you could tell. And then Dylan Tate pretty much allowed the A's to put this one away. He gave up 2 runs in the 7th inning on 3 hits, a strikeout, no walks, a couple of big hits that made it a 6-3 Oakland lead. And for Tate, the stuff actually looked pretty good. He just left a couple of pitches down the middle and at inopportune times for Dylan Tate. He still got a couple of whiffs. He, was throwing the ball in the strike zone. Just the velo was down again for Dylan Tate. His average on the year, 95.5. He was averaging 92.5 on the fastball. And it was very weird. All of his pitches velos were way down. The changeup velocity was down 3 miles an hour on average. Now, he was throwing that new slider. That's why the slider velo was so down. It's a different shape slider, a slower one that comes in about 79 miles an hour. But velo down on Dylan Tate. So definitely something to watch as he did get hit around. Travis Lakins did throw a scoreless inning, but I still need him off this team. Second thing you need to know from the Orioles' 6-4 loss is that before the bullpen kind of gave it away, it was one of the worst starts the Orioles have had in a while. And it was really the worst start by an Oriole pitcher, probably, you could argue, since Tyler Wells' first start of the year when he gave up those 4 runs against Tampa. And again, Tyler Wells just didn't have his best stuff. He lasted just 2 1/3 in this one, allowing 2 runs on 5 hits. Now, he had 1 strikeout. He didn't walk anybody. He gave up a solo home run to Cristian Pache in the 3rd, ended up throwing 54 pitches and allowed 5 hard hit balls. And the stuff was okay. And again, he was throwing strikes, didn't walk anybody. And he got 7 whiffs on his 54 pitches. That's not bad at all from Tyler Wells, and got 3 of them on the changeup, which, was pretty solid on the day. But really that, to Pache, he almost struck him out the pitch before the homer, and then he just left a slider right down the middle. And Cristian Pache, a former top prospect in baseball, hit his 2nd homer of the season. Again, it's hard to take a lot out of this from Wells because he only records 7 outs. You see less than 60 pitches. As he gets stretched out more, we will learn more, but it's been kind of bad outing, good outing, bad outing so far for Tyler Wells as a starter. Third thing you need to know is that despite the loss, the Orioles actually did come up big a little bit with runners in scoring position. As surprising as that sounds, they didn't fully get the job done, but they did a little bit. In the 7th inning, they were trailing 4-1, and they started a rally in that 7th inning. They got 2 hits with runners in scoring position. As Rougned Odor got an RBI single, Austin Hayes got one as well to cut it to a 4-3 ball game. And even in the 8th inning, when it was 6-3 at that point, Cedric Mullins led off with a double, went to 3rd on a wild pitch. And yeah, they didn't get a hit with the runner at 3rd, but Ryan McKenna hit a ball to the outfield, produced a sac fly to make it a 6-4 game. And, you'd like the hits to come, but at least they got the runner home from 3rd. And it was progress for the Orioles today offensively. 4 runs on 7 hits, 2 of those hits with runners in scoring position. It was progress for the Oriole offense. And it was tough to watch in the first 3 games of this series, and they still did lose, but at least there was a little progress there. Fourth thing you need to know from this one is that the Orioles, well, they really need Adley Rutschman. And for a lot of reasons. Because Adley Rutschman's the best prospect in baseball, and he's going to be amazing, but the catching situation is rough right now. Another 0-for-3 for Anthony Benboom, who is hitting a whopping .063 on this season for the Orioles. Now, he's had some good plate appearances. He's drawn some key walks throughout the year. But in terms of putting the ball in play and getting on base, Benboom is not really that guy. Now, he's a pretty good defensive catcher, and that's why he made this team as the backup to Robinson Chirinos. But after Chirinos, got hit by that deflected pitch off his face on Wednesday, he had to sit out this one. Luckily, all the x-rays were negative. Concussion test was negative. He'll be out a couple days. But Brandon Hyde, he should be able to return this weekend in Anaheim. So the Orioles didn't add a catcher to the roster. Chirinos was available in an emergency, but basically it forced Benboom into playing most of the game Wednesday and starting and playing the whole game on Thursday. There were a couple spots where usually would have pinch hit for Benboom, but Brandon Hyde just felt like he couldn't because he didn't want to put Chirinos in the game. And Chirinos is now, not Chirinos, Ben Boom is now 1 for 16 at the plate this season. And, even if the defense is solid, I would think about at this point, even bringing up Jacob Nottingham to replace him. He's been red hot at Norfolk, but please, Adley Rutschman is going to be a part of extended spring training. Their games start this weekend. I need Adley soon in Baltimore. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles 6-4 loss to the A's is that we had an ump show in Oakland on Thursday. Trey Mancini, early in the game, hits a ground ball, deflects off the pitcher, throw from second, gets away from the first baseman. He runs through first, and his body slightly, like 1 foot, leaks into fair territory down the line. He walks back to the first base bag, and before he gets back to the bag, the catcher comes up, picks up the ball, and tags him, and the ump calls him out. Now, some people would argue that, he stepped into fair territory. That means he was heading towards second, and he should be out. But the letter of the rule is you have to make an attempt, and you have to show intent that you're trying to go to second. Yes, he technically did step into fair territory when he went by the bag, but, he didn't make any kind of move to go to second. It was just his body took him that way a little bit, and he calmly walked back to first. Well, Rob Drake, the first base umpire, calls him out. Trey argues. Brandon Hyde argues. It's just not the way you should call that rule. It was a bad call. And then he made it worse by, didn't throw him out, but Hyde and Mancini continue to argue after the inning ends. And he throws out Trey Mancini, and then he throws out Brandon Hyde. And the Orioles offense, which was already struggling, had to go without Trey Mancini for the rest of the game, who was actually one of the hitters who has been producing a little bit lately. And they had to hit Ryan McKenna in the DH spot for the rest of the game. And they had to go without their manager. And, the Orioles are already without Anthony Sanders and Tony Mansolino. So Freddie Gonzalez was bench coach, third base coach, and acting manager after Brandon Hyde got thrown out of the game. Luckily, he has plenty of managing experience back in the day with the Atlanta Braves. But, just an ump show and just really bad by Rob Drake. Just really bad job umpiring. And it was unfortunate to see Trey thrown out of the game. And who knows, maybe if Trey comes up in one of these big spots late in the game, the Orioles could have tied this game or taken the lead when they started that rally in the 7th inning. But just another ump show in Major League Baseball. But that's what you need to know from the Orioles' 6-4 loss to the A's. The O's now fall to 4-9 on the season. They lose 3 of 4 to the Oakland Athletics. But we're not done talking about this series. Coming up next, I want to go back to games 1 and 2 from the series on Monday and Tuesday. Didn't get to chat about those this week because they were late night games, and we ended up doing our minor league previews this week instead. But wanted to talk about those games, give you the 5 things you need to know from those 2 tight losses and what the O's can learn from losing 3 out of 4 to that's pretty gutted Oakland Athletics roster. But first, I got to tell you about Built Bar because, it was a tough week of Orioles baseball after beating the Yankees. They lose 3 of 4 to a pretty bad Oakland team. So maybe you need a pick-me-up. Can I interest you in a Built Bar? It is the best tasting protein bar on the market. They've got all these great flavors like peanut butter brownie. All the bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They taste great. It's like eating a candy bar. It's basically what it is, but it's still good for you. It's still got, just 130 calories. How about 17 grams of protein? How about that from Built Bar? This is a protein bar, good for you, does the job, also is delicious, just like a candy bar. So to get your hands on some of these delicious Built Bars, you're going to want to go to Built.com. You're going to want to enter the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, that is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by BlueNile.com. Whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. Shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces. Well, who is BlueNile.com? Well, you can look for jewelry, but if you're having trouble choosing, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They're available via phone or to chat, so you can get a memorable gift in your budget as well. For me, I know a lot of the people in my life like jewelry, but I'm not, the greatest expert on what kind of jewelry to pick out. That is where Blue Nile really factors into this entire equation. They help you out to pick out the right piece, especially with Mother's Day coming up here very, very soon. And this Mother's Day, you can give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Orioles listeners can get $50 off their purchase of $500 or more. Just use code Locked On. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Again, that is code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. So we're talking Orioles and Athletics as Oakland gets the O's 3 out of 4 times this week at the Coliseum. But, we just talked about what happened in the 6-4 Orioles loss on Thursday afternoon. But something we didn't get to talk about this week was what happened on Monday and Tuesday night, because the late games and the schedule here at the podcast, my personal schedule as well, just wasn't able to recap those games for you. Of course, on Tuesday and Wednesday's episodes, we did some minor league talk. We talked about the Delmarva Shorebirds, the Aberdeen Ironbirds, and the Norfolk Tides on the last 3 episodes previewing their seasons. So make sure to go back and check those out. But wanted to give you the 5 things you need to know from each of the first 2 games of this Orioles series in Oakland, as they lost game 1 5-1 on Monday night and then lost game 2 2-1 on Tuesday night. And the first thing you need to know from this set of the first 2 games before the Orioles, of course, did win game 3 1-0, is that the Orioles got some pretty good starting pitching from 2 guys who weren't in their starting rotation on opening day. Spenser Watkins and Chris Ellis came up pretty big in these first 2 games. We'll start with Spenser Watkins Monday night. 5 innings, 1 run on 2 hits, a strikeout, and 2 walks. He threw 67 pitches in those 5 innings. And listen, he got hit around a bit. He allowed 8 hard hit balls in those 5 innings, but he held down this Oakland offense to just that 1 run. And, it wasn't the greatest stuff in the world. It was 5 whiffs in 67 pitches. And, his 4-seamer wasn't great. Once again, the velo was at 92. It was not the 94 we've seen him throw earlier this year. So the velo was a little bit down. But what we did see from Watkins was kind of a new slider that he threw a lot. He threw 17 sliders. That was his second most used pitch of the night. Threw it about 25% of the time. And it looked good. That slider even got on Pitching Ninja on Monday night. Now, it only got 2 whiffs and only got 1 called strike. So he's got to work a little bit on the command. But that was the pitch that they seemed to swing at a lot. He got 11 swings on the 17 sliders he threw. Now, some of that is because a lot of them were left in the middle of the plate. They put the slider in play 5 times, also fouled it off 4 times. But, it was about 80 to 81 miles an hour. It was a good sweeping slider. And it kind of looked like similar to that whirly sweeping slider pitch that a lot of guys are throwing this year and starting to kind of take over the majors. So interesting to see Spenser Watkins, who did do a lot of work at driveline this offseason, has obviously added velocity, has added a new pitch. He's trying to go to that cutter more. That was his 3rd most used pitch, and he's throwing it for strikes. He threw the curveball for strikes. We'll see what Watkins can do. He's a 5-pitch pitcher right now, and we'll see if that can translate to more success. But then there was Chris Ellis, who, didn't last as deep into the game, but had a very Chris Ellis start. This is exactly what we saw from Chris Ellis in his 5 starts with the Orioles at the end of last year. He gets activated on Tuesday and makes his first appearance of the year. He goes 4 1/3 scoreless, allowing 4 hits, strikes out 2, walks 3, and throws 62 pitches. And it's kind of just what happened to Ellis last year. Now, he only allowed 1 hard hit ball. That's a really good number. He was hit a little harder last year, but it's 2 strikeouts to 3 walks. It's somewhere between 4 and 5 innings. And somehow he just keeps it scoreless by getting the outs when he needs to. And again, it's not this ridiculous dominant stuff. It's, 7 whiffs on 62 pitches. He got 5 whiffs on the slider, but he's throwing a whole lot of strikes. He's getting teams to put the ball in play, and he's relying on his defense. Fastball velo was about 93 to 94. He threw the slider a lot. He threw 29 fastballs to 23 sliders and then just 7 changeups and 3 curveballs. He's basically, as advertised, a fastball slider guy in his first start. And he threw strikes. He let the defense help him, and he threw a scoreless start. So I'd like to see Grayson Rodriguez and Kyle Bradish up here as soon as possible, but I'll take Chris Ellis for now, I guess is how I'll put it. Second thing you need to know from the Orioles' losses in those first 2 games is that the bullpen, it was still good. And to be honest with you, bullpen pretty much kept them in these 2 games. Now, to be fair, Joey Krehbiel did allow 3 unearned runs in the game Monday because the Oriole defense was not good. But they were unearned. His ERA still 0, and Marcos Duplan gave a couple of hits. But Keegan Aiken had 2 perfect innings with a strikeout, so that was pretty solid. And then, you go to the game on Tuesday, and, it was a 2-1 game basically the entire way. And, yeah, Mike Baumann got hit around a little bit. He gives up 2 runs in an inning and 2/3. But Félix Bautista, 1-2-3 inning with 2 Ks. Ciano Perez threw a scoreless inning as well. He still has a 0 ERA on the season. So the bullpen, was still getting things done. And Bautista just, again, was throwing just some absolutely unhittable stuff up there in the game on Tuesday night. Third thing you need to know is what I just mentioned. The defense let the Orioles down, especially in that Monday night game where they gave up, really, it was the 1 inning by the A's. It was a 4-run sixth by Oakland that gave them a 5-1 lead. I mean, you have a bad play by Odor and then a bad play by Arias, and it just wasn't good. It didn't help out Joey Krehbiel. Both his outs were via the strikeout. He tried to do his best as he could, and it's got to be better than that. And if you're not going to hit, you got to make the plays defensively. And it's mostly been pretty good this year for the Orioles. And they completed a really good relay in Wednesday's game, but it just was not it on Monday night. Fourth thing you need to know from the first 2 games is that the offense, wow. 1 run on 7 hits in Monday's game, 1 run on 8 hits in Tuesday's game, but once again, just couldn't bring anyone home with runners in scoring position. I mean, even when you go back to Monday, Arias, 2 hits, Austin Hayes, 2 hits, Cedric Mullins had a triple in the game. Jorge Mateo had a double. Guys were getting on base. They drew 3 walks. They just couldn't bring anyone home. And it gets frustrating at some points. You're looking around and you're saying, can we just get a hit when it matters? 8 hits and 1 run on Tuesday. Santander and Mancini, each with 2-hit games. Mountcastle had a double. Mateo had another hit from the 9 spot. They drew 3 more walks, but they just couldn't bring anyone in when they truly needed to. They were 1 for 7 with runners in scoring position in the game on Monday. That 1 hit came with an Austin Hayes double in the 5th inning that tied the game at 1. And then in the game on Tuesday, it was, the same kind of struggles. They were 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position, left 10 men on, and they had an expected batting average of 302 in that game on Tuesday. It just didn't come through with the hits when they needed it, and that kind of continued. And then the 5th and final thing you need to know from the first 2 games on Monday night is that, frankly, it's kind of wild to see the Orioles take 2 out of 3 from the Yankees, and this is more about the whole series, and then lose 3 out of 4 to a terrible Oakland team. I mean, this Oakland team is not good. You look at this lineup they're putting out there. I mean, I get it. After trading Chapman and Olsen, who've been in the middle of your lineup for years, it's not going to look great. But, I mean, I look up and down, and you can make a serious argument that even though the Orioles hitters aren't faring well early this year, I mean, they put out a better 9 night in, night out than Oakland does. And Oakland's got a lot of kind of no-name relievers like the Orioles do. And, they probably have a better starting staff at this point, especially without John Means in there for the Orioles. But, I mean, this lineup with Sheldon Neuse hitting 2nd and Christian Bethancourt, who was a pitcher for a while, is hitting 5th. And, you've got Elvis Andrus in there. And they're bringing up all these rookies making their major league debuts. And it's tough to watch these 2 offenses. That's why there weren't a whole lot of runs scored in this series. But the Orioles do lose 3 of 4 to Oakland, but they can turn things around on this West Coast trip because next up they have the Boston Red Sox. No, they don't. They have the Anaheim Angels. Excuse me. Boston Red Sox, they are next week for the Orioles. Already thinking ahead to when the O's finally return to Camden Yards next week. But it's the Anaheim Angels that the Orioles will play on the road this weekend. We'll preview that series coming up here in just a second. But first, got to tell you about betonline.net because, the Orioles taking on Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, and the Angels. So you're probably not thinking they're going to do too well. And the Angels have played pretty well so far this season, but don't count out the O's if they continue to pitch the way they have. You could probably get some good odds on the Orioles at betonline.net. But it's not just baseball odds. You can get NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, and everything in between. You can also play your favorite Vegas casino games right from the comfort of your own couch. You can also get sports scores. You can listen to podcasts. You can get all your news, everything. It's a one-stop shop over at betonline.net, where the game starts. So Orioles and Angels coming up this weekend, a 3-game series starting tonight, and some more West Coast late baseball for the Orioles. Game 1 tonight, 9:38 p.m. Eastern time. And the current Orioles ace is heading to the mound. That's right. Bruce Zimmerman is going to make his third start of the season after 4 scoreless innings on home opening day and then 5 scoreless innings against the Yankees over the weekend. Bruce, who struck out 10 in 9 innings this year, will face the Angels lineup. He will go up against Reed Detmers, another young left-handed pitcher, former top 100 prospect. The 22-year-old, well, he has been hit around a little bit. In his first 2 starts, he allowed 5 runs in 3 1/3 against Texas, and then 2 runs in 4 innings against Houston. So we'll see if the Orioles can get to Detmers on Friday night. Then the Saturday game is a 9:07 p.m. Eastern time start. Spenser Watkins is right back to the hill after that start we just talked about. 1 run over 5 innings in his second start with the Orioles this season on Monday. He's going to go up against Noah Syndergaard, who is back from Tommy John surgery, signing with the Angels a 1-year deal this offseason. And the 29-year-old righty has kind of picked up right where he left off. He opened his season with 6 innings, 4 strikeouts, 2 runs against Texas, and then followed it up last time out against Houston, 5 1/3 scoreless. Only struck out 1, but 2 pretty good lineups, and he's rolled through them, and he's still throwing pretty hard from the right side. So it'll be fun to see Syndergaard back on the mound, but we'll see if the Orioles can get to him. Then the Sunday game is a 4:07 p.m. Eastern time start, and Chris Ellis is back to the hill. 4 1/3 scoreless in his first start. Can he keep the ERA at 0? He will match up against Jose Suarez, the 24-year-old left-hander, who in his 2 starts this year, his first one was 4 1/3, 2 runs against Houston, and then 4 1/3, 3 runs against Texas. So he has definitely been a little shaky from the left side this season. But Anaheim coming into this series, they've had a good start to the year. Mike Trout did just get hit by a pitch earlier this week. He's been day-to-day, hasn't played the last couple of games, but the expectation is Trout will be back in the lineup, unfortunately for the Orioles, this weekend for the Angels. Of course, they have Ohtani, who's doing Ohtani things. O's, though, very lucky they won't have to face Shohei on the mound in this series. And, of course, they've got guys like Rendon and others who have played well. And it's been a pretty solid start to the season for the Angels. They were off on Thursday, but they come in 8-5 on the year into this 3-game series. But as we know, the Orioles have played a lot of fun games in Anaheim over the years, and including, of course, the Stevie Wilkerson 16-inning save and everything in between. But there's been some cool moments there, and maybe the Orioles can make some cooler moments in Anaheim this weekend. But Orioles and Angels coming up this weekend, and then I'll be back with you on Monday to recap everything we saw in Anaheim this weekend, give you the 3 big takeaways from the series in what will be episode number 500 for me as the host of this pod. Thank you so much for listening for all of these 500 episodes and hopefully 500 more here on the podcast. But again, we're back Monday recapping the weekend series between the Orioles and the Angels. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.